Imagine a city where tens of thousands of individuals live packed together in total darkness. No mayor, no police, no written laws. And yet, everything runs with terrifying precision. Food arrives exactly when needed. New buildings appear overnight. Enemies are detected and eliminated within seconds. The city never sleeps. It never stops working. And every citizen knows exactly what to do without ever being told. This city is a bee colony. At first glance, a hive looks like chaos. Thousands of insects buzzing, crawling, flying in every direction. But when scientists began studying bee colonies closely, they realized something shocking. A hive is not just a group of insects. It behaves like a single living organism, a superorganism. The colony breathes. It grows. It regulates temperature. It reproduces. It defends itself. It even makes complex decisions. To understand how powerful this system really is, we have to stop thinking about individual bees and start thinking about the hive as one giant creature made of thousands of tiny bodies. Inside a typical honeybee colony live between 20,000 and 60,000 bees. Each bee has a tiny brain smaller than a sesame seed. On its own, a single bee is not particularly intelligent, but together they form one of the most sophisticated natural systems on Earth. And the first clue to understanding this system begins with a single individual, the queen. Most people imagine the queen bee as a ruler who gives orders and controls the colony. But this is one of the biggest myths about bees. The queen does not command the hive. She does not manage workers. She does not make decisions. Her role is far stranger and far more biological. The queen is the reproductive heart of the colony. She's the only female capable of laying fertilized eggs. At her peak, she can lay up to 2,000 eggs per day. That is more than her own body weight in eggs every single day. She's not a ruler. She's an organ, like a heart pumping blood through a body. The queen pumps new life into the colony. Her existence begins in an extraordinary way. Every queen starts as a normal female larva. Genetically, she is almost identical to the workers around her. The difference is diet. A future queen is fed exclusively with a substance called royal jelly, a nutrient-rich secretion produced by worker bees. This diet changes her entire development. Her body grows larger. Her ovaries fully develop. Her lifespan extends dramatically. A worker bee lives about 6 weeks in summer. A queen can live up to 5 years. One change in diet transforms destiny. Once mature, the young queen leaves the hive on a mating flight. High in the air, she mates with multiple male bees called drones. This moment will determine the genetic future of the entire colony. She stores millions of sperm inside her body, enough to fertilize eggs for years without mating again. Then she returns to the hive and rarely leaves for the rest of her life. Hidden deep inside the hive, surrounded by attendants, the queen begins her endless task of laying eggs. Thousands per day, day after day, year after year. But the queen's most important power is invisible. She produces pheromones, chemical signals that spread through the colony like a scent-based language. These pheromones tell workers that the queen is healthy and alive. They help regulate behavior, suppress reproduction in other females, and maintain unity inside the hive. If the queen dies, the entire colony knows within hours. Panic spreads. The superorganism has lost its reproductive heart. Worker bees immediately begin raising a replacement. This brings us to the true engine of a hive. The workers. Every worker bee in the colony is female. They are sisters, daughters of the queen, and they perform nearly every job required to keep this superorganism alive. Their lives follow a strict timeline. A worker's job changes as she ages, almost like a programmed career path. In her first days of life, she becomes a cleaner. She cleans empty cells and prepares them for new eggs. Hygiene is critical inside the hive. Disease spreads easily in crowded environments, and the colony cannot afford infection. After a few days, she becomes a nurse. She feeds larvae with mixtures of pollen and nectar. She cares for developing bees like a childcare worker in a nursery. Later, she becomes a builder. Using wax secreted from glands in her abdomen, she constructs the iconic hexagonal honeycomb structures. These hexagons are mathematical masterpieces. They store the maximum amount of food using the minimum amount of material. As she ages further, she becomes a food processor. She receives nectar from foragers and converts it into honey by evaporating moisture and adding enzymes. Then she becomes a guard. She stands at the entrance of the hive, inspecting every bee that tries to enter. She can recognize colony members by scent. Intruders are attacked immediately. Finally, in the last phase of her life, she becomes a forager. She leaves the hive to collect nectar, pollen, water, and tree resin. This is the most dangerous job in the colony. Many foragers never return. A worker bee's entire life is a progression of careers, each perfectly timed to match her physical abilities. No supervisor assigns these roles. No leader gives instructions. The system runs on instinct, chemical signals, and environmental feedback. The hive organizes itself. And then there are the drones. Male bees exist for one purpose only, to mate with the queen. They do not collect food. They do not build comb. They do not defend the hive. Their entire life leads toward one moment in the sky during mating season. After mating, a drone dies instantly. Those that fail to mate face a slower fate. When winter approaches and food becomes scarce, worker bees expel drones from the hive. Without food or shelter, they starve. To the superorganism, drones are seasonal reproductive tools. This may sound brutal, but the hive does not operate on kindness or cruelty. It operates on survival efficiency. Every individual is a cell in a larger body, and this body is about to reveal something even more astonishing. The hive does not think the way humans think. There is no central brain, no command center, no leader making strategic plans. And yet, every day, thousands of bees make complex decisions that allow the colony to survive, grow, and adapt to changing conditions. Scientists call this phenomenon swarm intelligence. Each bee gathers small pieces of information from the environment. Temperature changes, food availability, threat levels, space inside the hive. None of them sees the full picture. But together, their tiny decisions combine into a powerful collective mind. One of the most astonishing examples of this happens when a colony becomes too large. A hive cannot grow forever. Space becomes limited. Resources become stretched. When the colony reaches a critical size, something remarkable begins to unfold. The colony prepares to reproduce, not by laying eggs, by dividing itself. Roughly half of the workers leave the hive with the old queen in an event known as swarming. Thousands of bees pour out into the air, forming a swirling cloud that can stretch across the sky. For a moment, it looks chaotic, but this is one of the most organized migrations in nature. The swarm gathers on a temporary branch or surface, forming a living cluster around the queen. Now begins one of the most democratic decision-making processes ever discovered in animals. Scout bees leave the cluster to search for potential new homes. They explore tree cavities, rock crevices, abandoned structures. Each scout evaluates a site based on size, entrance direction, height from ground, and protection from weather. When a scout finds a promising location, she returns to the swarm and performs a waggle dance. This dance encodes distance and direction using movement and vibration. Other scouts observe the dance and fly out to inspect the location themselves. If they agree the site is good, they perform the same dance to recruit more scouts. If they disagree, they search elsewhere and advertise different locations. Multiple options compete at once. No debate, no argument, just dances. Over time, one site begins to attract more and more supporters. As the number of dancing bees increases, the signal strengthens. Eventually, a tipping point is reached. Once enough scouts support a location, the entire swarm lifts into the air and flies directly to the new home. This process can take hours or days. And remarkably, it almost always leads to the best possible decision. The colony has voted, without leaders, without meetings, without awareness of the full problem. The hive thinks as one. Inside the hive, another invisible system keeps everything alive: temperature control. Honeybee larvae must develop within a very narrow temperature range, around 34 to 35 degrees Celsius. Even a few degrees above or below this range can kill developing brood. The hive must function like a living thermostat. When temperatures drop, worker bees cluster tightly and vibrate their flight muscles without flying. This generates heat, warming the brood area like a biological heater. When temperatures rise, the strategy reverses. Thousands of workers fan their wings at the hive entrance, creating airflow that cools the interior. Others collect water and spread droplets inside the hive. As the water evaporates, it lowers the temperature through evaporative cooling. The hive sweats. The colony maintains perfect climate control using thousands of tiny bodies acting in coordination. Food storage is equally impressive. Nectar collected from flowers is transformed into honey through a process of digestion, enzyme addition, and dehydration. Honey is essentially concentrated energy stored for future survival. During times of abundance, bees gather far more nectar than they need. The extra is stored in wax cells and sealed with caps. This surplus allows the colony to survive winter when flowers disappear and temperatures drop. A strong colony can store tens of kilograms of honey, enough to feed thousands of bees for months without leaving the hive. This system has allowed honeybees to survive harsh winters for millions of years. But honey is only part of the story. Pollen is equally essential. It provides protein, fats, vitamins, and minerals needed for larval development. Bees pack pollen into pellets on their hind legs and transport it back to the hive. There it is stored and fermented into a substance called bee bread, a long-lasting nutrient source. The hive farms its own food supply. Communication inside this superorganism is constant and complex. Bees use pheromones, vibrations, touch, and movement to share information. A bee that discovers a rich flower patch can recruit hundreds of others within minutes. The waggle dance is one of the most studied communication systems in the animal kingdom. It allows bees to transmit spatial information using angles and timing. The direction of the dance relative to gravity represents the direction of the sun. The duration of the waggle represents distance. It is a living GPS system. The colony can map landscapes, track seasonal changes, and adapt foraging strategies dynamically. All of this emerges from tiny brains working together. But the hive's most intense behavior appears when danger arrives. A colony contains enormous food reserves and vulnerable brood. It is a treasure trove for predators. Bears, birds, wasps, and mammals all attempt to raid hives. Worker bees become soldiers when the colony is threatened. Guard bees patrol the entrance constantly. They check incoming bees by smell. Each colony has a unique chemical signature. Intruders are immediately attacked. When a bee stings, she releases an alarm pheromone. This chemical spreads rapidly, signaling nearby bees to attack the same target. Within seconds, dozens or hundreds of bees can coordinate a defense. Some species of bees perform an extraordinary defense called heat balling. When a large predator, such as a hornet, invades the hive, hundreds of bees swarm around the intruder and vibrate their muscles to generate heat. The temperature inside the ball rises high enough to kill the predator. They cook their enemy alive. The colony protects itself using collective sacrifice. A honeybee's stinger is barbed. When she stings a mammal, the stinger lodges in the skin and tears from her body as she flies away. The bee dies shortly after. From an individual perspective, this is suicide. From the colony's perspective, it is immune response. The superorganism survives because individuals are expendable, and this leads to a deeper truth. Every behavior inside the hive serves the survival of the colony, not the individual bee. Every action inside the hive, from birth to death, is guided by one ultimate goal: survival of the colony. The individual bee does not matter in the way individual humans do. In the world of the hive, the colony is the true organism. The bees are its cells. This idea may Sounds strange at first, but when scientists began studying honeybees through this lens, everything started to make sense. The hive behaves like a brain made of thousands of moving parts. A distributed intelligence where each tiny body contributes to a much larger awareness. And like any living organism, the colony can become sick. Parasites, diseases, pesticides, habitat loss, and climate change are now placing enormous pressure on bee populations across the world. Entire colonies sometimes collapse suddenly in a phenomenon known as colony collapse disorder. One day the hive is full and active. The next, it is nearly empty. Workers disappear, leaving behind the queen and young bees who cannot survive alone. It is one of the most disturbing mysteries in modern ecology. When a colony dies, the impact does not stop at the hive. Bees are among the most important pollinators on Earth. As they travel from flower to flower collecting nectar and pollen, they transfer pollen between plants, enabling fertilization. This simple action supports entire ecosystems and global agriculture. Roughly 1/3 of the world's food production depends directly or indirectly on pollination. Fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, and many crops exist because bees move pollen from one flower to another. Without pollination, plants cannot produce the foods humans rely on every day. If bee populations decline, food systems begin to weaken. Crop yields fall. Prices rise. Ecosystems lose plant diversity. Animals that depend on those plants begin to struggle. The ripple spreads outward through the food web. The disappearance of bees would not mean human extinction, but it would reshape the world in ways that would affect every person on the planet. And this is what makes the bee colony one of nature's most powerful systems. A hive is not powerful because of strength. A single bee is fragile, small, easy to crush. But together, thousands of them create a system that farms, builds, communicates, defends, regulates temperature, stores food, makes group decisions, and reproduces as a unified whole. They have no leaders, no central control, no written plans. Yet the system works. For millions of years, this tiny society has perfected cooperation on a scale that humans are only beginning to understand. Engineers study hive architecture to design efficient structures. Computer scientists study swarm intelligence to improve algorithms. Robotics researchers design drone swarms based on bee communication patterns. The hive is more than an insect home. It is a blueprint for collective intelligence. And perhaps the most fascinating part of all is how invisible this system is to most of us. Bees move quietly through gardens, fields, and forests, performing millions of tiny tasks every day. We rarely notice. We rarely think about the invisible networks that support our lives. Yet every bite of fruit, every handful of almonds, every field of blooming crops carries the silent signature of pollination. The work of the hive is everywhere. There is something deeply humbling in this realization. A creature with a brain smaller than a grain of rice helps sustain global food systems. Thousands of them together create a living machine more efficient than many human systems. Nature did not design the bee colony overnight. This system is the result of tens of millions of years of evolution. Every behavior refined, every instinct sharpened, every role optimized. The hive is a masterpiece of cooperation, and its message is surprisingly simple. Complex systems do not always need central control. Intelligence can emerge from cooperation. Stability can arise from countless small actions working in harmony. The superorganism thrives not because any single bee is extraordinary, but because all of them are connected. Next time you see a bee moving between flowers, it may look like a small, ordinary moment, but in reality, you are watching one tiny part of a vast living system at work. A system that feeds forests, sustains farms, supports ecosystems, and quietly helps keep the human world running. The hive never stops. The system never sleeps. And the survival of millions depends on the invisible labor of thousands of tiny wings. The bee colony is not just a group of insects. It is one of nature's most powerful systems.